come and day one go home. What's up, y'all? How's it going? Welcome to Campaign Diaries Session 4, Episode 4. Mike here with an update on our latest session. Last we left off, our party had taken a rest outside the spider cave after deciding to evacuate and try to rest up before venturing further in. So they made their little shelter and they were able to successfully sleep through the night with Meadow watching over them. So the party sleeps through the night and they wake up safely in the morning. But before they do, we do Pax's vampirism roll. Slowly starting to build a system for this. I think it's going to be a system where the DC slowly gets higher, and if Pax passes, he won't be overcome with the urge, and the DC will slowly raise. And if he fails, he'll either have to satiate that thirst or take some sort of detriment, maybe a bane to his constitution or something like that. We called for the roll and Pax rolled a natural 20 right off the bat. So he's safe for the night. With the nat 20, we went ahead and left the DC. We put it at a DC 12 constitution save. It's gonna stay like that because of the nat 20 for this night. While the rest of the party was sleeping soundly, Mateo was having a bit of a restless night. He fell into a dream, a troubling dream about the night where everything changed, the night that led him to where he is now. He had a dream that he was back in his home village of Sokolov. It's a wintry mountain village up north of North Astoria, just north of Hillhome, which is kind of like the high, like the hill lands, and Sokolov is way up in the mountains. He's returning from the village with groceries for him and Alexander, his husband, and their 2-year-old son. As Mateo approaches his house, he notices that even with the heavy snow conditions, the door is wide open. And he sees this, and as he gets closer, the door is kind of swinging, and he sees there's blood splatter in front of the house. He immediately drops everything, runs inside, and sees that his house has been completely ransacked. He looks around. Alexander is nowhere to be found. He does not hear his voice anywhere. And he sees there has definitely been a struggle here. There's been a battle, a fight, and there's blood on everything. Everything's been ransacked. And his very next thought is to run to the child's room, which he does. And there's a large trail of blood leading to the room and straight into the child's bed. He looks and stands over his child's bed and sees no one in it, just soaked in blood, and wakes up. Terrible dream. He doesn't really tell anybody what happened, but the rest of the party is already kind of starting to rise in the morning. And as the party begins, putting their armor on, getting ready, talking about what they're going to do with the cave, Gaston sees a little box, a little package right outside of the camp. This box is wrapped in kind of parchment paper with a green and blue ribbon. And as he opens it, what do you know? There's a little note that says, Happy Winter Solstice from the big man. Wonder who that could be. So this was just a little Christmas, some Christmas gifts for the characters. We had Pax receive a silver raven statuette. It's a little figurine of a raven that can be, you speak its command word and it will transform into like a raven familiar. Gaston received a lightning javelin. Mateo received a ring of spell storing. It's a golden ring that kind of wraps around 2 fingers and you can store spells by casting spells into it. Billy Bob Jr., who is now back after a week of absence, received a heavy iron rod with like 2 horses on each end of it. This is the immovable rod. Anyone who knows anything about the magic items in D&D knows this can be used for some fun and maybe annoying hijinks. We'll see. It's at this point that Billy Bob Jr. looks around and he's like, where's Meadow? We don't see Meadow anywhere. And sure enough, there is no sign of Meadow. Either way, they all gather their things and they decide that they are going to try to brave the spider's cave again. So the party straps on their things and wasting no time, Pax takes out a torch, Gaston lights a torch, Mateo raises his dancing lights, and Billy Bob Jr. casts a purple glow onto his shield, and they begin marching with Pax Pax leading the way, Billy Bob right behind him, and Mateo and Gaston taking up the rear. And they begin to march back into the spider's cave, just lighting the whole thing up. So as the party enters the cave, we went ahead and just rolled initiative right off the bat. Initiative felt kind of weird in this situation because I wanted to be in like a slowed down time, but with Pax leading the way, it kind of made more sense that Pax should have gone first. Maybe something to think about for the future, but we did go off of initiative in this particular situation. And it didn't take very long before the spiders struck again. This time there were 2 of the giant kind of wolf spiders and the large phase spider, the holographic one that can phase in and out of the material plane. That one was nowhere to be seen just yet. The spiders come crawling in. Combat kind of breaks out in this thin tunnel that leads to the large open cavern. As they're fighting off these spiders, the spiders are not getting much purchase on them. Pax is pushing through, leading the way. The group is being very careful to avoid the webbing on the walls and these clusters of spider eggs that are kind of patched around the walls of the cave. They begin to push their way through, and Mateo, he's pushing his dancing lights further and further forward to where eventually he sees there's a large pit in the center of this cavern that has opened up now. It's about this time that you see the holographic web starting to blink in, and this phase spider comes around the front of the cave and takes a shot right at Pax and gets a good like fang hit right in him. Now it's on. The party for a very long time, probably longer than it should have been, is fighting in this tight space with the smaller spiders and the phase spider kind of at the mouth of the cavern, kind of attacking them as they try to come through. Eventually they did push out into this open cavern, and they now have some more space to work with. Now, this is a very dark cavern, but as they push their lights forward, they start to see that it is basically circular. It's like a big dome, and there's an opening at the other end. There is this pit in the middle that Billy Bob Jr. Runs over to and kind of shines his shield down into, and is able to see that it is thick with webbing. This kind of looks like where they take their prey when they kill them. There's all these wrapped up cocoons with like bones in them, but he rolled a really high perception check and saw that there were the shimmers of like pieces of gold down there. Now the party has no gold yet. Remember, when this campaign started, they were prisoners in the desert, and it has gone straight from that into the Feywild, and they have not found any gold at all. So a little bit of gold could come in handy once they get out of the Feywild and try to find their way back home. The battle is going on. I rolled at the beginning of combat a d4 and came up with a 2. So what that means is every 2 rounds, one of these spider egg clusters are going to hatch no matter what. So a couple rounds go by. Eventually, the first spider swarm erupts and immediately just swarms all over Pax, just crawls all over his body. He's preoccupied with fighting the other spiders, and they're just getting free hits, just biting him all over the place. They're slowly making their way through this big cavern, basically trying to wipe out everything in the room. And this is gonna have some consequences. A few rounds into battle, Pax takes a big hit and he goes down. He drops right at the edge of the pit. Gaston sees that Pax is down and rushes over to him. His hands glow with like this divine energy, and calling upon his chosen god, which Gaston has not revealed to anyone yet, who he worships, who his deity is. But he calls upon the favor of his chosen god. His hands glow with divine energy, and he lays his hands on Pax, brings him back from the brink of death. Mateo, meanwhile, is shooting chaos bolts. He's now like using his sorcery points to like twin spell and double his chaos bolts. They're making their way around. Pax, coming back to life, throws a torch down into this hole and kind of burns away some of the webbing. Sees that sure enough, there's a ton of gold down there, but there's also another spider. And he summons his echo and sends his echo down there to start looking around and kind of fighting off this spider. It's about this time that Gaston comes around and he sees what's going on down on the bottom of this pit. Another spider swarm, a couple rounds later, breaks out of the cluster and crawls up all over Gaston, We eventually get another one that makes its way over to Mateo. Gaston is trying to burn this thing off with a torch, which is pretty smart, but he gets about half of it off. He does like a flying people's elbow off of the edge of the pit and drops 30 feet down onto this thing, taking 3d6 himself and doing 3d6 to the giant spider. He fucking pummels this thing. It dies, Gaston goes down, and he is now at the bottom of this pit. Mateo and Billy Bob Jr. at this point are making their way further towards the edge. Mateo shoots a couple of chaos bolts at this phase spider while it's trying to phase in and out. It's not being as much of an issue as I thought it might have been, but they are able to take the phase spider down. They actually take it down first. I think they took down one large spider, then the phase spider. So there's like one spider left. It's very clear they're going to kill this thing, but these swarms are starting to be quite a problem. When they bite, they do a decent amount of damage, but they'll also do a bunch of poison damage. Billy Bob Jr. runs ahead and sees that there are two paths in front of them. There is one that is a big opening that descends steeply down, and there is another like small crack, like a fracture that's been broken out in the side of the cavern that is too small for a large spider, and there is like a pale blue light emanating from it. He kind of tries to perceive this, and he smells two very different smells coming from each direction. From below the big tunnel pit, it smells warm. There's a very damp air coming up from it, and there's like a sickly sweet kind of scent to it. And the one above is cool, dry air, kind of a pale blue light coming from it. And the stench of death, like the stench of decay, is blowing in from there. Billy Bob Jr. begins descending through the bottom tunnel as Mateo starts to squeeze through this thin fissure into this pale blue stone hallway. While this is going on, Gaston and Pax are having a bit of a situation of their own back at the pit. Gaston has woken back up, but he is having a really hard time climbing out of the pit. Pax comes over and undoes a length of rope and lets it down to assist Gaston. So he kind of ties it off on himself or just like holds onto it. And as Gaston climbs it, Gaston begins climbing this rope and Pax begins pulling him up. Gaston climbs back out of the pit. And a few more rounds of like getting rid of the last of these swarms. Pax this whole time has been running around with a torch and just like burning out all of the extra clusters of spiders so they won't keep spawning. So there's a couple rounds left, and they basically clean out this whole dungeon. They clean out this whole room. So Pax and Gaston catch up to the other end of this room where there's these two ways to go. Billy Bob Jr. runs ahead down this tunnel and kind of scopes it out. And what he sees causes him to quickly turn back and tell the party that that is not the way that they're going to go. Billy Bob Jr. is a pretty big guy. He has a gift, so he kind of looks like a humanoid hippopotamus. But he was able to squeeze through the crack using his immovable rod to kind of give him something to grab onto and pull. And Gaston and Pax, they squeeze through to meet Mateo, who is already gone a few feet ahead and ran into a familiar friend. They see Meadow in this tunnel. It turns out Meadow had kind of scouted ahead and tried to find a path for them to move ahead through, and they had woken up while she was still kind of lost in this cave somewhere. So they catch up with Meadow, and we actually have a new guest that is playing Meadow tonight, maybe joining our campaign actually, so stay tuned for that. And she kind of informed them that there was a strange room up ahead, and she leads them to it. So they're walking through this tunnel system. It is chiseled stone. It's like this pale blue stone. And it looked like whoever was carving this tunnel kind of hit that spider cave and just was like, all right, we stop here. And so they spend a while walking up this tunnel for probably half an hour to maybe an hour. And they eventually come into this room. The party enters this room. It's got the same pale blue stone as the rest of the tunnel. But at the other end of the room, there is a stone gate with a stone door, and there are elvish runic kind of arcane carvings along the arch of this door, and other various kind of strange arcane runes on the door itself. That heavy smell of decay is kind of blowing up from under the crack in the door. Gaston and Meadow are both able to read Elvish. I think Mateo is too, and they read the inscription on this archway: "Leave incantation for travel." In front of this door, there is a small rectangular pool of like bioluminescent water. It's very shallow, maybe just a few inches, but it's kind of this crystal clear water that almost glows with like this blue-green shimmering light. Whenever you're at the pool and you see that reflection of water off the walls, that's kind of shimmering. So this whole room has this cool mystical feel. There's these little blue mushrooms, like these pale blue mushrooms with like darker blue spots all over them, kind of coming out of the cracks in the walls. Mateo is the first one to walk over to this shallow pool. The party's all kind of sitting there. You've kind of got your Fellowship of the Ring outside of Moria situation. Everyone's kind of like, what do we do? What do we do? Everyone's kind of discussing what kind of what levels of spells we might pump into this thing, because it says leave incantation for travel. So everyone's thinking, okay, maybe we leave a magic item, or maybe we need to pump a certain spell into this, or a certain level of magic into it. So while they're discussing this, Mateo kind of wanders over to this pool. He sees his reflection in the still water staring back at him. Rolls a perception check and begins to notice his features morph and change into a more grotesque version of himself. He does not like this at all. It's taking him to a dark place. So he steps back and the party's kind of like, what was that? Mateo's like, I don't know. I didn't like it though. Whatever that was, I didn't like it. So Billy Bob Jr. walks over and he peers into the pool as well. Rolls perception. He sees his reflection at first, which slowly fades away into like a landscape of a land that he's never seen before. It's almost like a great African savanna. There's these huge beasts like lions the size of a house and these giant herding animals. And he sees this paradise of the hunt, this place where a hunter could go and hunt the biggest game in the multiverse. And he sees this beautiful, great golden sun rising and the effigy of his god Hippias slowly coming up over the horizon as he turns away. And he was like, what are you talking about? That was amazing. Pax runs over. Now everyone kind of wants to get a look at their own reflection. He sees himself through the eyes of his echo, this echo that he's been recently able to summon. It's kind of like this misty in-between world, this ethereal plane that the echo kind of lives in, this split in time. And his echo is looking at Pax. So he's seeing himself through the eyes of his echo, and Pax is fighting with the party up on this wall of a castle. And there's guards everywhere, and you see some of them are wearing the crest of Lord Brexton. It's like this red sash with kind of a white cross and like lions on each corner. These guards are fighting. There's someone behind them on the other side that they can't see that they are also fighting, and then the party is just in the middle and just in between them both. It's just chaos, it seems like. He sees himself take an arrow right in the heart. Pax drops, and these guards, these Brexton guards, they kind of grab him and drag him into the crowd, and he watches his bloody corpse pulled away into the chaos of this battle. He shakes out, doesn't really know what to think of it. They're like, he knows this hasn't happened to him before, but I mean, is it possible to read the future? I mean, this is D&D, like we can't force anything to happen, so what could this mean? Gaston then comes over, rolls a perception check. He looks at his reflection and sees a version of himself that he has been trying so long to leave in the past. Gaston had a gambling problem, and he sees himself in his lowest moment, out of money, down and out, in some dingy tavern, probably heavily in debt, and just is reminded of where he was and where, if he's not careful, he could end back up. So everyone has these experiences in the pool, and Billy Bob Jr. kind of puts a boot in the pool to test it to see if it's dangerous. Ripples the water some dirt from his boot kind of spreads out into the pool, but there really is no other reaction. Some people are discussing the visions they've had. Some people don't want to talk about it, especially Mateo. But Mateo, while the rest of the party's kind of turned back to this puzzle, he steps forward once again to this pool. He can't help himself, and he looks again into the reflection. And this time he does not pull away. He continues to stare. And once again, his form starts to melt and kind of change in grotesque ways, and eventually gives way to a shadow. And the shadow speaks to him. It says, Mateo, it's your fault. Everything that happened to your family, one way or another, any way you want to look at it, it's your fault. You should have been there, and you weren't. And Mateo gets a ping, shatters his mind. He stumbles back. He makes his save, but still takes 2d10 psychic damage and takes an insane amount of damage, brings him down to 1 freaking hit point. He falls back. Everyone runs over and is like, dude, what, are you okay? Are you okay? What happened? He is completely shaken. Now, Mateo's anger, pain, and guilt about what happened that day to his family and everything since is now manifest and is now a tangible voice that can speak to him. And kind of like Pandora's box, he can't put it away. So everyone's had these experiences now, and they're kind of trying to take it in, but they also have the task at hand. They're trying to figure out how to open this gate. So they keep reading it over and over, and finally, Pax says, all right, what did it say again? Leave incantation for travel. He stops for a second. Lift. L-I-F-T. Billy Bob Jr. runs over, puts his hands under the crack. Door swings wide open. So this gate swings open, and they see the source of the stench. There is an equestrian, one of these centaur, these agents of the Fae, who had somehow fallen down to the other side of this gate, wasn't able to figure out the riddle, and couldn't make it back up. They look up past him, kind of back up the tunnel. The cave basically collapsed, and he became trapped down here and died. Billy Bob Jr. searches this guy, finds, I think he found 2 arrows. They were coated in some strange substance. He kind of runs his thumb over it and almost like dozes off, almost falls asleep. So they're like, okay, these are probably like tranquilizing arrows. He also finds a brass key, the small gold key with like a horse's head on it. They begin pushing forward, and Billy Bob Jr. actually removes the rocks that were in the way with a really high strength check and clears the way back out into fresh open air in the Feywild. As they step back into the forest, Meadow is like, okay, I think we're close. This looks like near where the witch is. They travel a little bit further, and they come out to a huge opening, kind of the line of the forest, and there are 3 fields in front of them. To the left, there's a field of red poppy flowers. In the middle, there is a field of lavender, and then off to the right, there's a field of barley. So Billy Bob Jr. is feeling pretty gung-ho. He's under the impression that as long, everyone's been telling them, as long as you believe where you're going the right way. So he starts bounding off into the field of lavender. Mateo is like, wait, no, that's not right. But Billy Bob Jr. is not listening. He begins running off. And you see him kind of almost start to disappear into this field. Mateo kind of pulls out his journal where he keeps his notes. And he looks back, and he's been taking notes. The player has been taking notes. Zach has been taking notes. Back in Faerivon, Mateo used Detect Thoughts on Spore and saw that he was thinking about a poppy field when he was talking about Agnes the Witch. So he calls this out to Billy Bob Jr., and Billy Bob Jr. turns around just at the last second before shit got bad, because there was bad shit in the fields of lavender, and comes back and regroups with the party. Gaston and Pax agree that this is the way to go. Meadow's all about it. They begin making their way into the field of poppy. Meadow has to make a saving throw. Fey creatures in this world are allergic to poppies. That is presumably why Agnes has taken refuge in this field. She makes the save, is able to carry on without falling asleep, and they eventually come over the hill. Gaston and Pax are kind of leading the way, and they see smoke rising. Come over the hill. There's a small cottage with 2 scarecrows way out in front to kind of keep birds and stuff away. These scarecrows, like, sitting there. The party knows those scarecrows are gonna do something. And sure enough, as they approach, they like twitch, like lift themselves up off of the post and jump down and start like just bumbling like all ragdoll towards them. Pax yells out. He's like, "Oh, great witch, we mean you no harm. We want to have counsel with you." Doesn't do anything. Gaston's yelling like, "Spellcaster, great spellcaster, please, where are your manners?" And Billy Bob's yelling out. Mateo, he's like, Agnes, calls her by her name. That's enough. She calls off the scarecrows, and they see this little old lady opens up the door to her cottage and invites them in. They step in. There's this big cauldron in the middle of the room, kind of slightly bubbling. They can smell fresh apple pie. She's just pulled a pie out of the oven. She offers them some pie. Billy Bob Jr. eats it right up. Gaston takes a good bite of it, and it turns to worms in their stomach. "Oh, it's just a prank I always pull. I'm so sorry. Where are my manners? I'm sorry." They take 1 poison damage. It's not a big deal. I don't think they thought it was as funny as I thought it was going to be. But Gaston actually kept it down. Poor Billy Bob Jr., he hadn't had a good apple pie in so long. It brought brought some tears to his eyes. So Agnes actually felt bad about this, and she cooked him up a fresh apple pie, free of worms, and they enjoyed a nice warm pie, probably the first cooked food they've had in a while, and kind of started explaining to her what the situation was. Agnes nodded. She told them, "I'm not a witch. I was sent here as a child. I got lost and ended up here when I was young. The equestrians hunted me, and I found out this field was the only place I was safe. So this is where I've been for countless years. I can't even remember, how it all began." Pax asks, is there a gate? How did you come in? Is there a way out? Agnes thinks for a second. She's like, "Well, I know. There is a gate in the equestrians' camp. They guard the one gate in and out of the Feywild." So Agnes knows that there is a gate that the equestrians guard in the fields of barley. That's where their HQ is. She kind of tells the party, you could try to break in and maybe, pull a heist, get in there, just get through the gate as fast as possible. There may be another way. Maybe I could make some kind of concoction, some kind of potion to open up a gate to the material realm, but she can't quite remember how to do it. If you can help jog my memory, maybe we can find the recipe that would build some kind of makeshift gate back to the material plane. The party has a few options, right? The party can either take this idea and try to help Agnes recover her memory from a long time ago. They can try to infiltrate the equestrians' headquarters, and those are the 2 true gates that are known. Or they can go back to like Mushroom Lagoon or search for another like natural gate, but then you have like the time shift and all that, and they really don't want to do that. So they agree to take Agnes's offer. "Let me warn you, it's going to hurt." And she starts boiling the cauldron. So she brings this big cauldron to a boil, and Pax is all about this. He's got no qualms with it. "I'll go in. I'll be the one to go." Pax's willingness to take on this challenge kind of scared the party a little bit at first. They were like, "You want to jump in boiling water?" But his resolve kind of brought the rest of the party around, and they all agreed eventually to help recover Agnes's memories. Agnes brings this cauldron to a boil, throws some weird ingredients in. "All right, get in." And the party climbs in to the boiling cauldron. Pax was the first one to go in, and he jumped in and just disappeared into the water. Psst, and found himself tumbling through this deep ocean of just boiling, bubbling, steaming water. The rest of the party climbs in after him, And that's where we ended our session. So that was session 4. Next week we will be playing, and we'll have our party venturing into the recesses of Agnes's memories to try to help come up with some sort of recipe that they can make a portal of their own back to the material plane. Saw a lot of really good teamwork in this session. I think the party is finally starting to conglomerate into a unit. There's still a lot to go, but we're starting to see some teamwork. Pax and Gaston. Pax helping Gaston pull himself out of that pit. It was really dope when Gaston did that flying people's elbow into the pit. Also, he got a hero coin just for that. Everyone kind of bringing up their lights to light the way through. Mateo's note-taking. Those 3 fields, that was a test because it was mentioned 2 sessions ago that the poppy fields were the place to go. And it was not mentioned again after that. Mateo had made note of that. Zach had made note of it, and then Mateo had made note of it. But wanted to see if that was gonna be stick, and it did, which was awesome. I think the party is very ready to get out of the Feywild, and hopefully after venturing down into this cauldron, they're going to be able to find a way to finally escape this crazy, crazy place we call the Fey. So yeah, that was session 4. Super, super stoked for session 5. And I think next week we're going to have a party of 5. So very exciting stuff. Thank you for tuning in. Once again, this is Mike, and always thank you to the heroes that make all these adventures possible. Love you guys and cannot wait to continue the journey next session. Y'all have a wonderful evening, and I will see y'all in the next video. Peace.